It's Two on the Aisle with me, Charles Gross, and Leslie Hoban Blake. Tonight, reviews of Little Shop of Horrors, Scotland, PA, The Sound Inside, Height of the Storm, and L.O.V.E.r. Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to Two on the Aisle. And tonight, ladies and gentlemen, we run the gamut. Horrors to L.O.V.E.r. and everything in between.
Yes, we start with Little Shop of Horrors.
Little Shop of Horrors. Well, this is the classic based on the Roger Corman movie. And I have to say that the director, Michael Meyer, has basically, if you're looking for anything new, you're probably not going to find it here. This is a very by-the-book production. However, the book that Michael Meyer is using is the one he borrowed from Jerry Zaks, who did something similar with Guys and Dolls and Hello, Dolly. And it is a very fine book indeed, because Little Shop looks as if, you know, pretty much as if he just teleported it through time from, I think, 1982 when it first opened. But the show just feels fresh. It feels new. It is clever. It is well done. And if you look at the score, book and lyrics, Howard Ashman, music, Alan Menken, you realize what is missing from so many Broadway musicals today. I mean, they can describe the suburbs so just creatively with a song like Somewhere That's Green, or they can do so many clever variations with doo-wop. And it's just, you realize what true musical theater writing can be. Now, this is based on the Roger Corman film, and, well, if you only know it from the movie, spoiler alert, the plant wins. This is about a Yutz by the name of Seymour, Jonathan Groff, who is in a dead-end job in a dead-end shop on Skid Row, and is somewhere in the late 50s, early 60s. And suddenly he acquires this plant, kind of a Venus flytrap-like plant. And it's this strange and unusual plant, and suddenly the shop is doing business because everyone loves this plant.
It's after the meteor.
Well, after
shower.
a total eclipse of the sun.
And a meteor shower.
And a meteor shower? Okay.
So.
I don't think so. Just a total eclipse. It doesn't matter. Anyway, problem is the plant, which suddenly starts to talk, requires human blood. And the question is, what will Seymour do?
The question is whose?
Yeah, well,
the real
anybody
question.
who's human. The question is initially whose, and then it really doesn't matter too much. Seymour initially, you know, he's just cutting his fingers and bleeding it, and then suddenly the plant wants more, a lot more. So will Seymour say goodbye to his fame and his rising fortune and his chances of getting Audrey, who is his co-worker who he has been secretly in love with for years?
Well, what he does, great, which is so great, is he kills off his arch rival, the sadistic dentist,
right,
who is Audrey's boyfriend, and
right,
beats her up. Played to perfection by Christian Borla.
Right, who plays several roles. This is also a Little Shop tradition.
And gets applause
this
for one
actor,
of them. He just slums across the stage, and everybody who loves Christian Borla.
And that's a lot lot he does these roles, so he's especially good as the dentist.
Yes.
And again, also a very clever song there, too.
Willy Wonka. I mean, you know, he has a range.
He does. He does. And here he's a businessman, he's a customer.
He was also Shakespeare in Something Rotten.
So we can agree that we like him as an actor?
We like him a lot. By the way, I don't know whether you mentioned that it was Jonathan Groff playing Seymour.
I did.
And Jonathan Groff right now is on Mindhunter. So Jonathan Groff has gone from the king, the very fair king in Hamilton, to Mindhunter, where he's working with serial killers, to
what a coincidence.
Seymour. Yes, exactly.
Who is a serial killer?
Yes.
He becomes one.
Exactly. And
also he's one of the few voices who actually carries through the theater. I was disappointed. I had a lot of trouble hearing a lot of the actors.
But not Borla, and not
Borla, but and not Kingsley Leggs as the plant. But pretty much everywhere else, including Tammy Blanchard as Audrey.
Well, I really wanted to say a couple of things. Okay. I love the movie, and so I was thinking about...
Which one? The one that it's based on, or the musical?
The Roger Corman movie. This is not a movie, this is a musical.
No. Well, I know, but there was a movie made based on this version also.
Okay.
With Steve Martin.
Yeah.
Among others.
Yes, I know. He played the dentist.
Yes,
I know. Okay. But
you were saying.
Okay. Was I? Yes.
You was.
I was.
You were.
that Tammy Blanchard, to me, plays more Judy Garland than Ellen Greene. There's a fragility.
Ellen Greene was the original.
Ellen
Audrey.
Greene. Well, I'm using the originals when I say this. Jonathan Groff is so much cuter than Rick Moranis, and it's very hard to think of him as a schlub who becomes enamored of a shrub, which is basically what goes on.
I like that. The schlub goes for the shrub. Yeah, okay.
And then the last part is of this for me is that the guy named Legs.
Kingsley Legs as the
Legs,
voice of the
thank you.
plant.
But he's not just the voice of the plant, he's physically inside the plant, playing the plant. There are legs on that plant. You may not have noticed, but there are legs on the plant. He comes out and takes a bow. Did you
well,
notice?
of course. Well, but again, that was done in the original.
When the plant is full
that
size.
is done in the original production.
When the plant is full size, somebody, maybe not Legs.
Yes,
but
there
somebody.
are 4 puppeteers:
Okay.
Eric Wright, Teddy Udain,
Okay.
Chris Roberts, and Chelsea Turbin
Then I'm
are
wrong
manipulating
about that,
the plant.
But somebody's legs are actually inside that plant when it's on the stage. And I think what's wonderful is we saw a middle place. We saw this revived at some point in late 19s or early 20s.
It was on
remember which.
Broadway.
Yes, and it went wrong. It did everything wrong. It tried to go bigger. And going smaller is exactly the right thing. Skid Row is the right thing. Now, what we haven't talked about is this, we have a trio above the line. We have Borla and Jonathan Groff, and we have Tammy Blanchard.
Now, did you like Tammy Blanchard? You were talking about her performance.
I liked the fragility. I liked her.
You see, to me, she was a little too hard-boiled at times.
Well, the fragility and
Audrey.
hard-boiled are the opposite, so I don't know.
Well, again, I felt she came on. Her accent was very.
Well, her accent was so forced.
Yeah.
That it was almost like what's her name, in Marissa Tomei in Tattoo, but
Rose
here
Tattoo.
there's nobody to complain. I mean, it's a New York accent. Are we all going to get up and say, "Hey, that's not the way we sound"? Come on. Michael Mayer discovered Jonathan Groff in.
We have to.
Okay, but help me out here in Spring Awakening. In Spring Awakening. And they have been friends ever since, so for them to do this together was really wonderful. The Below the Line trio was the one I wanted to mention, which are
The Urchins.
The Urchins, who are all named after, and they are Marvelette, if I may say so. They are really Marvelettes. That's my little joke. And there are 3 of them, and they're named after other singing groups of the 60s. So Ronette is played by Ari Groover, Crystal is played by Salome Smith, and Chiffon is played by Joy Woods in respect of those things. Lovely casting. I thought it was beautiful. I had a great time.
I did too.
I had a bloody good time, as they say.
Okay. Yes.
So I would give it a 4.5.
I would too.
Okay.
I highly recommended.
Yes.
Little Shop back off Broadway where it belongs. Also, this Howard Ashman and Alan Menken went on to be instrumental in the Disney revival with movies like The Little Mermaid
Absolutely.
and Beauty and the Beast.
And one of them directed the original one. I don't remember if it was Menken or Ashman, but one of them directed the original off-Broadway.
Offhand. All right, moving on.
Moving on.
To a very similar topic, interestingly.
Well, we're in the bloody musical vein. Now, I'm going to hold up a colored card over here. I'm going to hope that I'm not holding it up in front of anybody's face. This is called Scotland, PA. There is a real place called Scotland, PA. And what Scotland, PA is doing is something that's been done many times before, and that is to take Macbeth and try to do something else with it. This time it's a musical. But it has been a Japanese movie called Throne of Blood. It was a cult. This is particularly a cult classic. James LeGros, Maura Tierney, and Chris Walken playing Lieutenant Macduff. So what you've got here is the Macbeths. They are a family in Scotland, PA.
Husband and wife.
They work together in a hamburger shop. It doesn't particularly have it's Duncan's. The guy's name is Duncan. Well, gee, Macbeth, right? And by accident here, it doesn't start out where she's pushing him to be better. By accident, Duncan gets killed. That nobody knows. It's an accident. They take over the shop. And then all of this stuff starts. They didn't do it on purpose. They get the friar and he falls in it. They didn't expect that to happen.
He was going to kill him, and he is urged on. Little Shop had its urchin. This has its 3 stoners.
Well, this has its 3 witches who are played as stoners here.
They're called stoners.
I know.
Who are urging Macbeth.
It goes back to Macbeth.
Known as Mac here, and the wife's name is Pat.
Yes. And it's interesting, the casting, there's somebody that we've seen in several
And they
shows.
are responsible for him going in for Duncan getting deep fried, because otherwise you wouldn't have Lieutenant Peg McDuff or Detective Peg McDuff
Right.
snooping around.
Not exactly Chris Walken, but you know, what can you do?
Right.
She has her own kind of
more like
quirkiness.
Columbo or
Yes.
maybe even McGruff, the crime
Oh,
dog
that's
from
funny.
that
Now
time.
that's very funny, but she does have her own quirkiness, so it works
Yes.
out. What they've done is, and also to make
That's
her a woman.
Megan Lawrence.
Yes, and they've made her a woman.
Yes.
But the three stoners, the one that we know best is Alicia Umfris. We've seen her in several shows. And then, I can't pronounce the second one, Wanu Ogunafora and Caleb Wells. Please forgive me, Wanu. I know I made a mess out of that. Ryan McCartan plays Mac. Jeb Brown plays Duncan. Taylor Emin Jones plays Pat.
Mrs. Macbeth.
Mrs. Macbeth, and J. Armstrong Johnson plays Banco, the good friend. Okay.
Oh, Banco, who's kind of a bit of a stoner himself, you know,
Well,
kind of
Banco is
drunk.
Banco,
He's gonna
obviously.
end up at Linda Vista someday, you think?
If he makes it through the play.
Indeed.
Which he doesn't.
Yeah.
He becomes a ghost.
Here's
That's the way it's
here's the
supposed to be.
thing. If I hadn't seen Little Shop of Horrors,
Right.
I might have thought this was a
Right.
lot clever.
Right.
Also, if I hadn't seen Othello, the remix, which was a rap version of Othello a couple of years ago,
Yes, yes.
I might have seen. This is a cute musical. I do have to question. It's set in 1975. And Mac, as in Macbeth, he's discovered, you know, basically they create McDonald's, except in 1975.
It was already there.
It was already, like, he's coming to Duncan and saying, I have a
Yes.
great idea, it's called the drive-through.
Yes.
Well, the drive-through had been around for
Yes.
30 years, so I don't quite understand
But
the point
it's-
of doing this in the 70s.
Well, because that's the way so they could have the stoners as the witches. That's why they did it.
They had stoners in the 30s, they could have drunks as the witches. I don't
Well,
know.
the point is, we didn't write it, and
We didn't.
And
But we-
Billy
but we are
Morissette
que-
did.
but we are que- we
Mort
are- we are
Tierney's
questioning
husband, Billy Morissette, did write it.
Right.
The-
Well, Michael Mitnick did the book. Adam Guan did the score.
and Lonnie Price, your little Lonnie
did
Price,
did the direction. Yes.
and the direction is fine. And
Yeah, it's fine, and that's about as far as it goes.
Yeah.
It's an enjoyable show, but put it up against something like Little Shop,
Well, it's
and
an
you
un-
realize what really amazing is to.
it's unfortunate
enjoyable.
that it came in the same season. I'm sure the gods who looked down on us laughed when this happened. You know,
Right.
and I agree with you. It's cute, and it shouldn't be cute. I mean, it's supposed to be scary, and of course, it's not
Well,
scary.
it's
Little
definitely
Shop
not
is much
scary.
more scary.
Oh yes, Little Shop is scary.
Yes, in its own way. They won't give us pictures of the large Audrey, by the way. We have pictures of the small plants. I tried to get a large. They won't. They exist, but they won't let us have them.
They want the
'Cause
element of
she's
surprise.
really-
but we
she's
are
really
talking
something.
about Scotland,
So
PA.
anyway, Scotland, PA.
And your conclusion.
I think it was audacious to try to make a musical out of this. It was already a quirky little film. I had seen it. I used to be a film critic in those days, and I'd seen it then. It was about 2001 or something. Anyway, doesn't matter. I can't give it more than a 2-ish.
Oh really?
We have 2 1/4-ish.
We do? Really?
Yeah.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, I liked it, but again, coming off the tail of it, it's sad. I can't. But you know, if you have the 2 in they got to make it
I would
on
give
their
it,
own.
between 3 and 3.5.
Oh.
I do think it's. Look, it's definitely not 4.5 like Little Shop, and it's definitely not in the same league.
I'll
but
give it 2.5.
It's still
I'll
a very,
bump it up
it's
to
still a
2.5,
very
but-
enjoyable evening.
Well, yeah, but-
and I will give it that.
Okay.
All right, moving on. Now I would say this was the long-awaited return to Broadway for Mary Louise Parker, which it kind of was. She was on Broadway a few years ago in a show that I did not enjoy, so it's kind of nice. So
What was the show you did not enjoy?
The last one she did on Broadway.
Oh, I
think it
don't
was. All right.
remember it.
Anyway.
Well, I'll look it up.
This is The Sound Inside, and this is Mary Louise Parker, and this is interesting. You know, we've been covering a lot of one-person shows,
Well, it's
and
not
this
exactly.
is kind of, well, it's not, but it is. And I'll tell you why. It's actually a 2-person show. It's Mary Louise Parker as this 50-something college professor, I think at Yale, and Will Hotchman as a very
Dead Man's Cell Phone. Was that the one you didn't care
unusual.
for?
No, I don't think so. Unusual doesn't matter.
Okay.
Unusual student and the relationship, platonic, that they have with each other, and just to make things a little more interesting, they have her probably, with cancer that is probably going to be terminal.
Oh, I like the way that's just sort of thrown in to be interesting. That's a very
Yeah.
important plot point. Yes. Okay. Directed by David Cromer, who
Yes.
has done some wonderful work in the last couple of years.
In lieu of dialogue, she's basically, and he often turned to the audience and tell us what's going on, which is why I call it kind of a one-person show, because they don't talk to each other very much at all.
Yeah.
And and it's novel, and it's a very tricky thing to do.
And it's about a novel as well. It's not just
it's
novel.
about a novel that he's writing,
Yes.
and that's where a lot of the twists and turns are there.
And she's his professor.
And becomes his mentor and his
Right.
friend. He does not seem to have very many friends.
No, he's a very odd duck.
And yes, and I will say I was.
And we're not sure where he's going to go, whether there's anything dangerous about him or not, which is very good.
Or where the relationship
Right.
is going to go.
Well,
You think, in the Me Too era, it can't go that way. Well,
it could.
Maybe it
doesn't-
could.
Yeah, of course. It doesn't.
We're not
mean-
telling.
Right, exactly. And I think that's the thing that's wonderful about this. First of all, I'm an Adam Rapp fan. I know a lot of people are not. This is Adam, well, there we go, Adam Rapp's, there we are. And I'm not always a Mary Louise Parker fan because the play has to really fit her, like Proof and like How I Learned to Drive.
Right.
And there are other
Which
things.
she will be doing later this season.
Yes, and it's a lot older for that. I don't know. But anyway, I don't know whether that matters. I've just never seen it with an older person. But anyway, and she did Hedda Gabler, which I hated. But I think this fits her, and I think it's really well done. And it's so rich, it's chewy. There's a lot of material.
Yes.
There are a lot of references to Crime and Punishment, and that's really what the framework of this is. Crime and Punishment is a young student who comes and he kills an older woman, and is that going to happen? And we're not going to say, but is that going to happen hangs over this play for me. And so it causes a great deal of suspense.
That never even occurred to me.
That's what it's about. She's talking about Crime and Punishment.
I'm aware, but the fact that he would physically threaten her, that never entered my mind.
It wasn't a question of threatening. He came in and he killed the old woman. He didn't threaten her. He just killed her.
Well, yes, but this was a pawnbroker, and he had a beef,
yes,
so.
I know. But what I'm saying is that was, to me, the specter hanging over it. And I think Adam Rapp it's the best piece of work I think he's done in years.
Okay.
It's clever. They say this difficult dialogue so easily, it trips off their tongue.
Yeah, and again, there isn't even that much dialogue. She says, and he told me this, and he told me that, and he's sitting right there sometimes, and he does the same. And he does the same thing.
But when they speak, that's dialogue.
And the chemistry is excellent between the two of them.
And the growth between them.
Again, this is Will Hodgman and Mary Louise Parker.
Yes, I really found this well done.
I did too.
The direction by David Cromer, again, meticulous direction. And he just came off being in Waverly Gallery as an actor. So, and winning a nomination for that. So I just think he's a marvelous guy. I'm very happy we have him.
And so your conclusion
I would give
is?
this 4.5. I really enjoyed it. I
think
felt good about
I will
it.
go as far as 4 with it.
Okay.
I
Well, that's
enjoyed
high
it
for
too.
you for this.
I really would like to see Mary Louise Parker in How I Learned to Drive. I don't know how it will work now that she's older.
Well, that's it.
But the fact is, so much in that play, if it's done right, is done metaphorically. So it may not even matter.
It may not matter. That's what I was thinking. Okay.
You know,
but it does
hopefully
matter.
we'll get the chance to see it and find out.
Right. It does matter here.
Yes.
This is a play about growing old.
Yes.
It's called The Height of the Storm, and it's by the same person who wrote Mother and Father. Now, Father was a very interesting piece. I didn't care for it that much, but it had a wonderful performance by
I think it was Franklin.
Frank Langella. Thank you. Yes.
Yes.
And then there was Mother with Isabelle Huppert, which made me crazy. It made me absolutely insane.
And not in a good way.
Not in a good way, not in a normal way. But this is also translated by Florian Zeller, writes these things, and Christopher Hampton translates them. And again, pictures of 2 actors who are going to be, there we are, I got to find a place to put it, who are going to be nominated for Tonys.
Jonathan Pryce, Eileen Atkins.
Yes, and we mentioned Jonathan Pryce when we were talking about another play.
Right.
He was a cause célèbre at one point. Anyway, Jonathan Kent, British director, directed this. It comes through the Manhattan Theatre Club, and it's the flip side of The Father. It's the older man going through the loss of memory, or is he going through it? Is he the one who's lost memory, or the wife? Is the wife there? Is she dead? And so it's that kind of. And so they are the husband and wife, Jonathan Pryce and Eileen Atkins. And it's
very confusing.
It's confusing, but beautifully done. The confusion. See, the father was ominous and dark, and even though this is called The Height of the Storm, there's sunlight coming through the window. It's not ominous. The father threw me. This one doesn't. I really felt that that this was a more gentle a take on pretty much the same subject. And, you know, it's the same subject. You get old.
Well, it's basically, I think the playwright is trying to draw you in and show you what it's like. When
That's what it was.
When you're undergoing that.
Yes.
Yes.
Yes. I mean, of course. Yes. And I think.
Well, they weren't there.
But I think this time they succeed. He succeeds rather. Whereas I didn't feel that. Everybody loved, and the performance, I thought, by Frank Langella was wonderful. But I didn't like that play. I liked this play very much.
And I like this. I like this also.
I would give this play 3.5.
I think 3.5 is.
Acting-wise, 5. I mean, just marvelous acting. But 3.5 for.
Right. This one is not one that it would hurt to read after you've seen it, just to kind of put it all together.
Oh no, I think I'd rather keep the ephemeral. I like that feathery quality. I really did. I didn't walk out with an axe over my head, which is what might happen if I read it.
Okay, I don't quite understand that.
Well, that particular imagery.
That particular imagery, no, I don't.
And now we come to the strangest little piece of the evening.
Okay.
It's not mine to talk about. It's
well,
yours.
this is called L.O.V.E.r. It's
really called L.O.V.E.r. It has periods after each, and it's not called Lover, but it spells lover.
L.O.V.E.r. Lust, orgasm, virility, erotic rapture.
Go ahead.
Yeah, L.O.V.E.r. With Lois Robbins, Karen Carpenter.
Is the director.
Yes, and she is it's a one-woman show. This is basically about Robin's life. And
Robin's sex life.
Well, but also her life in general.
She starts out by talking about the fact that she used to lean up against the washing machine to get a warm and cuddly feeling.
Yes, and when you're talking about your lovers, and the washing machine turns out to be the most interesting one, you know the play is in trouble.
Perhaps the most satisfying one as well.
That's we won't get into that. But here's the thing: this is about her life. This is her biography. You know, this is the type of play that's normally reserved for some famous person, and an actor will get up and play them and often go through their whole life.
Just the way you did.
Well, no, I went through one part of my life, and there's a difference. But in this case, her life was not all that interesting.
Exactly.
And you know, she had this round of lovers, and they were diverse, but not so much that you really.
It wasn't about her lovers. It was about her response to her lovers, what it did for her, what it gave her. And I think that was if I would have been more interesting if it had been about the lovers and who they were, and different and older and younger and whatnot. But it was always about, they always came back to, and I got a good feeling out of that, or that really made me, you know. And
I didn't get a good feeling out of it.
That got old pretty fast.
But she also takes time out, you know, to talk about her relationship with her children.
Who were in the audience, as far as I knew that.
Her bout with cancer, and I have to say there is a lot more movement here than
the play deserves.
You know, I mean, she's going through all up and down, in and out.
Yes.
You know, you had mentioned in our last episode about this woman who is hired to direct sex scenes. Intimacies. I don't think they had her here, but the way she was going around, you'd wonder if they had called her.
Well, since she didn't have a partner, she didn't need to have that. The intimacy is when there are two people involved.
She's doing all this. It's really a very athletic. It's a very athletic. It's a very athletic performance.
Very athletic.
And Lois Robbins is a very engaging performer. She just doesn't have a very interesting show.
No.
In this particular interest.
I think what happens is, as a woman myself, I would go, oh yeah, I remember that guy. And then she moved on to something else, and I thought, oh yeah, I remember that one. But that's kind of the way I responded to it. Very lukewarm response. I'm sorry, Lois. I think maybe she was going for something edgier and it didn't happen, or maybe that got too edgy, and I don't know. I'm just not sure where it went.
You know, it's also very hard to put your entire life on stage.
And to do your life through sex partners, which is what she was doing.
Yes.
It wasn't just her life, but it was that particular route. Which is, you know, I understand that too. You know, I went to look for an old boyfriend, he was dead. You know, I went, oh dear God. I mean, thinks to me, well, there's a story.
And we'll be coming to see about Leslie's dead boyfriends next year at the United
Do you think
Solo
I'm joking?
Festival.
That's my dead boyfriends. I thought about it. If I could remember
There we go.
lines, I would do it, but I can't.
Okay,
So
there we go. Well, we can have someone whisper it to you with it.
Yes, I can have that. Oh, well, you could do that for me. How would that be?
I
I'd
could
love
do
that.
Yes. All right. So
And
coming
I'd
to
go,
next
no,
year's
Charlie,
United
it's pronounced.
we go on.
Did we give it any? Did we give her any?
Well, I'm going to give her 2 playbills.
Yeah, that's generous.
I think we have to.
I think that's generous.
So let's just very quickly review the shows we saw tonight. We talked about Little Shop of Horrors. This is a revival, which again looks pretty much like it did from 1982, and that's a very good thing. Still feels fresh. We both agreed that it deserves 4.5 playbills. We also liked Scotland, PA, which is a musical of Macbeth.
But not as much.
Not as much.
Yeah.
Compared it to Little Shop of Horrors, it kind of pales.
Right.
We both liked. This is interesting. We both liked The Sound Inside.
Yes.
With
yes.
Mary Louise Parker, student-teacher relationship. And
I liked The Height of the Storm more than you did.
I liked it. You liked it more.
Yeah.
And we were both disappointed by L.O.V.E.r.
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 I wanted to say what those stood for, but you have one set of things in
Right.
the
Well,
script.
that's based on the script.
And she said another thing in the commercial, so I'm going to leave it alone.
All right. So L.O.V.E.r. does stand for something. We just
Can't
need to
remember
find
what it
out
is.
what.
L-O-V-E-R, lust, orgasm, virility, erotic rupture.
And that is our show for this evening. When you go to the theater, look for Leslie and me, us too.
On the aisle.
Don't you wanna be a somebody, a guy you can get it around?
Is this like a setup?
Don't you wanna be a big time, big shot?
Make your hot wife proud.
Breaking,
Don't need no magic spell.
pursue ancient
Oh, everybody's hungry. Time to get in on the chase. Shout out to the cosmos like I own the whole damn place. Yeah, it's okay dreaming, but I'm not sure I'm that guy. Come on, Pat, would all that make us happy?
We will be out of here forever.
Just me and you.
Me and you. That's all we got.
Newsflash, people. I'm an actress. I know how to act Jewish. I imagine it would be interesting to be with a woman, but I'd be a very selfish lesbian because I only want to be on the receiving end of that transaction. He connects with a beautiful woman who shall remain nameless. No, she won't. Her name is Deborah Slutface. If I'm gonna be imperfect, I will do it perfectly. I read that on Instagram, so it must be true.